Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening up a really remarkable passage from Scripture. It's one that perfectly shows how the Almighty uses complex political shifts, even devious human plots and, ancient Roman law to perfectly advance his ultimate plan.
That's right.
We are talking about the next crucial phase of the Apostle Paul's journey, and it's entirely determined by a change in governorship and a very strategic legal appeal.
Yes, this is truly a powerful session we're getting into, and it's rooted in the detailed teaching discussion provided by the You Need Faith in Jesus team series. We're focusing entirely on the book of Acts, chapter 25. Our mission today really is to thoroughly analyze how Paul's 2-year imprisonment finally concludes, how his legal situation shifts, quite dramatically actually, under the new Roman governor Porcius Festus. And maybe most importantly, how every twist and turn reveals God's sovereign hand, positioning Paul exactly where he had promised, on his way to Rome to bear witness before Caesar.
I think what makes this chapter so compelling is just how quickly things accelerate. I mean, Paul has been in Roman custody for 2 whole years under Felix. Now a new procurator arrives, and within days, boom, everything changes.
Yeah, it's quite a shift.
Let's unpack this journey, beginning with section 1, a governor's arrival and a murderous plot. This covers Acts chapter 25. Verses 1 through 5. We're seeing this major transition, right? From the corrupt Felix to this new guy, Porcius Festus, the new Roman procurator of Judea.
Yes, and it's probably necessary to pause and set the context for the listener here.
Okay.
As our sources emphasize, Felix, well, he was known for his greed. He deliberately held Paul for 2 years, hoping for a bribe. Acts chapter 24, verses 26 and 27 makes that pretty clear. He wasn't really governing. He was, frankly, exploiting the situation.
Right.
Festus, on the other hand, he steps into the role with what seems like a clear mandate from Rome, stabilize this volatile province, Judea, and, demonstrate some administrative competence.
And that desire for efficiency, it seems to drive his first action. He lands in Caesarea, the Roman administrative capital, but immediately, after just 3 days, he travels up to Jerusalem. That's political necessity, isn't it? He needs to meet the local power brokers, the Jewish religious and political leaders, kind of establish a working relationship.
Absolutely. He's keen to project authority and maybe earn the favor of the influential locals. But the religious establishment in Jerusalem, well, they weren't interested in just greeting the new governor. They were waiting. And they were still absolutely consumed by hatred for Paul.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
It really is. 2 years of Paul being locked away didn't diminish their malice one bit. It just allowed it to fester, as the teaching material points out.
Fester is the right word. They seized this opportunity instantly, asking for a political favor right out of the gate. Let's look at the devious plot they propose.
Okay, yeah. The source quotes Acts chapter 25, verses 2 and 3 from the King James Version detailing this. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul and besought him and desired favor against him that he would send for him to Jerusalem, laying wait in the way to kill him.
Wow. They disguise an assassination request as just a simple matter of, changing the venue. They tell Festus, wouldn't it be easier for everyone if Paul were judged here in Jerusalem? But their true intention is right there in that final phrase, laying wait in the way to kill him.
It completely exposes their motive, doesn't it? They weren't seeking justice, not even a legal resolution, really. They were seeking favor against him. Basically, a politically convenient arrangement that would let them bypass Roman due process and just execute Paul. And you can see how a new governor, maybe eager to please, might easily have just said yes.
Yeah, easily.
And we have to recognize the sheer audacity here. They had tried this exact same plan before, remember, taking a solemn oath to assassinate Paul on the road, which is recorded back in Acts chapter 23, verses 12 through 15.
It really speaks volumes about the persistence of spiritual opposition, doesn't it? If a tactic works, or seems like it might work, the enemy will just try it again later.
Exactly.
But this is where the mundane mechanics of Roman bureaucracy, strangely enough, become the instrument of God's protection.
Precisely. This is that beautiful intervention of divine sovereignty. Festus's decision, whether it was driven by, suspicion of the high priest or maybe just adherence to proper Roman administrative procedure, it immediately thwarts their plan.
So what does he say? Let's hear it directly from Acts chapter 25, verses 4 and 5, King James Version. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea and that he himself would depart shortly thither. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man if there be any wickedness in him.
So he refuses the transfer, flat out. He insists the trial must happen in the established Roman capital, Caesarea. Now, why did he do this? Well, he was a new official.
Hmm.
Maybe he was wary of moving such a high-profile prisoner on short notice. Perhaps he suspected the volatility of Jerusalem and just wanted the trial in the safer, more controlled Roman judicial setting. Or maybe he simply stuck strictly to the rule that the crime should be judged where the prisoner was already being held.
The teaching material really emphasizes that whatever Festus's human reason was, whether it was suspicion or just administrative efficiency, the effect was, well, miraculous in its outcome. His pragmatic decision providentially shut down that renewed assassination plot.
And this powerfully illustrates the principle of divine sovereignty in human affairs. You see, God doesn't always use grand, visible miracles. Sometimes he uses the functional decisions of an unbelieving ruler. A governor may be concerned only with his own career and keeping the peace, to protect his people and advance his purposes. It aligns perfectly with the truth we find in Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1, that the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord like rivers of water. He turns it wherever he wills. And that should be a massive comfort for you, the listener. Even when the systems of the world seem arbitrary or unjust, God is weaving them into his master plan.
That is a deep insight. God uses the Roman system, essentially, to save Paul's life. So the plot is thwarted. Festus returns to Caesarea, and now the actual trial, section 2. Paul's stand and the appeal to Caesar begins. This is Acts chapter 25, verses 6 through 12.
Right, and the trial starts with remarkable speed, just 10 days after Festus got back from Jerusalem. He seems eager to clear his docket and get this high-profile prisoner situation settled. Acts chapter 25, verses 6 and 7, King James Version, detail the scene. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down unto Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about, and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove.
Notice that language.
No,
Many and grievous complaints. It sounds overwhelming, doesn't it?
it does.
They were throwing everything they had at him, sedition, desecration, leading some dangerous new sect. But the crucial phrase follows right after, which they could not prove.
Exactly. They were relying purely on slander, hearsay, maybe mob sentiment, but not on verifiable facts, nothing concrete.
And Paul's defense, it's like a masterclass in concise integrity. He doesn't get dragged into a long religious debate. He just tackles the legal charges head on, addressing the 3 areas where he could be charged.
Right. His answer is in Acts chapter 25, verse 8, King James Version. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar have I offended anything at all.
That's it, clean and simple.
That is his complete declaration of innocence. He states he hasn't offended against the law of Moses, he hasn't offended against the temple, the religious center, and he hasn't offended against Caesar, the political authority. He's asserting his factual innocence across the board. And this leaves Festus with really no legal grounds for conviction under Roman law.
Which puts Festus in a truly difficult spot. He's a new governor, right? Paul is factually innocent of any Roman crime. But the most powerful local figures, the Jewish elites, they're demanding Paul's death. Festus can't really start his term by completely alienating the entire Jewish Sanhedrin. That wouldn't be politically smart.
No, and this is that moment where political expediency kind of trumps justice, which is constant temptation for leaders, isn't it? Acts chapter 25, verse 9, King James Version, captures Festus's internal conflict perfectly. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul, and said, Wilt thou go up to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these things before me?
Willing to do the Jews a pleasure. It just reviews his motivation right there. It's purely political survival, relationship building, not about justice. He's compromising Roman justice to try and keep social stability. And notice the little trick in his offer. He says the trial will be before me, suggesting he'd still preside, like it's still a fair Roman trial.
But Paul knows exactly what that means. A trial in Jerusalem, it doesn't matter who presided, it would be subject to the mob, the bias of the high priest, and let's be honest, the immediate threat of assassination either on the road or in the city itself. For Paul, this was a clear, probably spirit-led realization that his safety and his mandated mission lay elsewhere, not in Jerusalem.
This brings us to that monumental moment where Paul uses the shield of his Roman citizenship. And this is an act of spiritual boldness combined with real strategic wisdom. Why did Paul choose this moment? He didn't appeal when Felix was in power, maybe because the whole bribery context was too murky, too corrupt. But now, faced with Festus's clear political compromise, Paul knew he had to exercise his highest right.
He demands the highest court in the empire. Acts chapter 25, verses 10 through 12, King James Version, record his powerful appeal. Then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. For if I be an offender, or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar.
Then Festus confers.
Right. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, Hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar shalt thou go.
His response is just layered with integrity, isn't it? First, he asserts his right. I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. He knows his rights. Second, he affirms his desire for justice, not just evasion. If I be an offender or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. He's essentially laying his life on the line, demanding the legal system work properly, rather than letting it be corrupted by local politics.
Exactly. And the appeal to Caesar, the provocatio ad Caesarum, that was a powerful and immediate legal recourse. It was available to any Roman citizen, didn't matter what their status was. Once Paul uttered those words, I appeal unto Caesar, it immediately halted all the local provincial proceedings.
Yeah.
Festus, after quickly conferring with his council, his advisors, he really had no choice. He had to honor it. Unto Caesar shalt thou go.
And this leads to that profound theological connection our source material highlights. Paul wasn't just making, a clever legal move. He was walking directly into God's prophetic word for him.
Absolutely. You have to think back to Acts chapter 23, verse 11, King James Version. Remember when the Lord appeared to Paul in the castle in Jerusalem? He said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. So the appeal, which looks like a human legal tactic, became the guaranteed mechanism for fulfilling that divine prophecy. Paul used his earthly rights, but he aligned them perfectly with his heavenly mandate. His journey to Rome, which seemed blocked by Felix's greed, 2 years in prison, assassination plots, it's now legally guaranteed by the supreme law of the Roman Empire itself. God used the system.
Incredible. So Paul is off to Rome, legally speaking, but Festus immediately runs into a major bureaucratic roadblock, doesn't he?
He does.
Which leads us right into section 3. The gospel defined before royalty, covering Acts chapter 25, verses 13 through 22. Festus has to send the prisoner, but he literally has no idea what charges to write in the report that has to go with him to the emperor.
Yeah, this is a genuine problem for a new governor. He can't just send the man appealing his case to Nero without detailing the crime. He'd look incompetent, or worse, maybe politically biased. And the timing here is just perfect, divinely orchestrated, perhaps.
Yeah.
Because this coincides exactly with the arrival of King Herod Agrippa II and his sister Bernice, who came to salute Festus, a courtesy visit.
And Agrippa II wasn't just minor royalty. He was the last of the Herodian line. He was a local king who still had significant influence, particularly over the temple in Jerusalem. And crucially, everyone knew he was considered an expert in Jewish customs, law, religious disputes.
So Festus sees his solution walk right through the door. He explains the whole situation to Agrippa, hoping the king can help him draft some kind of coherent charge sheet to send to Rome. And Festus's summary of the events to Agrippa, which is recorded in Acts chapter 25, verses 14 through 20, is actually extremely revealing about the Roman mindset.
It really shows the Roman commitment to, well, at least the theory of justice. Festus outlines that core Roman principle of due process. It's noted in Acts chapter 25, verse 16, King James Version. It is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die, before that he which is accused have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him, which provides such a stark contrast to the shadowy, murderous demands coming from the Jewish leaders.
It really does. Then Festus moves to the heart of the matter, the nature of the charges themselves. He clearly expected something serious, like treason, sedition, maybe robbery. Instead, he just found religious squabbles. He admits the accusations weren't really about crimes against Rome, but concerned certain questions against him of their own superstition.
The sources are helpful here, clarifying that the King James translation superstition comes from the Greek word deus demonias. It's actually a more diplomatic term, meaning something like matters of worship or religion.
Right.
So Festus is essentially telling Agrippa, look, the charges are just these sort of silly religious differences that, frankly, I don't understand.
But in the process of trying to minimize the conflict, the pagan governor accidentally articulates the absolute foundational conflict between Judaism and Christianity. He identifies the core issue in Acts chapter 25, verse 19, King James Version, but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of one Jesus which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive.
That's it right there. It's probably the most elegant, unexpected summary of the gospel foundation you could ever imagine. And it's delivered by a bureaucrat just trying to figure out his paperwork.
Exactly.
Festus identifies the centrality of the resurrection.
And this is why the teaching material stresses this point so strongly. For the Roman governor and for the Jewish accusers, Jesus was a historical figure, definitely dead. End of story. The source of Paul's relentless offense, the reason the Jews hated him so intensely, was his unwavering affirmation that Jesus was not only alive but resurrected and Lord Draker. This is the ultimate dividing line, isn't it?
It really is.
If Christ is not risen, as Paul himself writes later in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 14 through 17, then our preaching and our faith are utterly in vain. It all hangs on this.
So Festus tells Agrippa he was so confused by these theological disputes, he doubted of such manner of questions that he just proposed the transfer to Jerusalem, which then prompted Paul's strategic appeal to Caesar.
And Agrippa, remember, he's intimately familiar with Jewish affairs. He has jurisdiction over the temple. Plus, his family history is steeped in this religious drama. His ancestors killed prophets, John the Baptist.
Right, the Herods.
So his interest is immediately piqued. Acts chapter 25, verse 22, King James Version. Then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him.
Agrippa probably expects some kind of, I don't know, cultural theater or maybe some interesting legal or rhetorical performance. But God is setting the stage. Paul, the prisoner, is about to be granted this incredible evangelistic opportunity before the highest society in the region, a king, a governor, all the elite military and civil leaders. This is a divine orchestration of audience and venue, clearly.
No question. The stage is set for the following day, which leads us right into section 4. Pomp versus the prisoner. This details the grand assembly in Acts chapter 25, verses 23 through 27. And this scene provides just a powerful visual theological contrast.
Yeah, the description of the royal entrance is really vivid. Let's read Acts chapter 25, verse 23, King James Version. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice, with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and principal men of the city, at Festus's commandment, Paul was brought forth.
The detail here is intentional. That phrase, with great pomp, the Greek word is phantasios. It doesn't just mean splendor. It implies a showy, ostentatious, maybe even a vain display of worldly status. You have to picture Agrippa and Bernice arriving in full regalia, dripping in royal finery, surrounded by the chief captains. These are high-ranking Roman military officers and the principal men of the city, the local elite.
It's the ultimate display of temporal power, prestige, human authority, and who is arrayed against all this glitter and gold.
Yeah.
The lone chained Apostle Paul dragged out from prison. The physical contrast just couldn't be sharper.
And this is the living out of God's kingdom strategy, isn't it? As the teaching material often reminds us, God frequently chooses the weak things, the humble, the imprisoned, the seemingly foolish things of the world to confound the mighty and the wise. Just like Scripture notes in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27, the pomp is fleeting. The truth Paul carries is eternal.
That's powerful. Festus then delivers a final preparatory speech, which actually serves as a necessary public declaration of Paul's innocence before this influential assembly.
And this declaration is vital for history, really. Acts chapter 25, verses 24 and 25, King James Version. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself hath appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him.
So the governor publicly confirms it. He's thoroughly investigated the matter and concluded Paul has committed nothing worthy of death. This declaration of innocence, made right there before a king, military captains, civic leaders, it effectively discredits the malicious claims of the Jewish leaders, at least in the eyes of Roman authority.
Yes, but despite that public exoneration, Festus's administrative dilemma, his paperwork problem, it still remains.
Right. He's determined to send him to Caesar, but he still can't figure out what to write on the form.
Exactly. He confesses this absurdity to Agrippa, as recorded in Acts chapter 25, verses 26 and 27, King James Version. Of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my Lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and especially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had him I have somewhat to write. For it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him.
He's literally asking for help drafting a plausible justification. He's basically saying, look, I'm obligated to send him, but I need your expertise, King Agrippa, to help me craft a charge that doesn't make me look ridiculous to the Emperor Nero.
It's incredible. The whole assembly has been gathered, not really for Paul's trial, but for a consultation on how to write a bureaucratic report.
Isn't that something?
But God used Festus's insecurity and Agrippa's curiosity to create the perfect opportunity for the gospel to be heard by this elite audience.
That detailed analysis of the chapter's movement, from the assassination plot to the legal appeal to this grand stage, it really drives home the theme of divine control, doesn't it?
It really does.
Let's shift now into Section 5, Theological Insights and Practical Application. Let's draw on the comprehensive teaching material from the You Need Faith in Jesus team.
Okay, we can definitely extract 3 fundamental teaching insights from this whole progression. The first is perhaps the most important comfort for you, the believer, especially when you're facing difficulty. Divine sovereignty in injustice.
Yeah, if you look at Paul's life just in this snapshot, he experienced systemic delay, personal injustice, 2 years under Felix, these murderous plots, and now a politically weak governor like Festus trying to please everyone. It must have felt like God's promise to go to Rome was continually being delayed or blocked.
Absolutely. Yet the plots, the corrupt nature of the court, Paul's necessary legal appeal, they were all perfectly orchestrated steps that actually ensured the fulfillment of God's specific plan. That 2-year delay meant that Festus, the efficient administrator, and Agrippa, the Jewish expert, were in place at the precise moment Paul needed them. It wasn't wasted time, it was waiting time.
The application here is so profound. When your circumstances feel delayed, maybe unfair or just confusing, when you feel stuck in a waiting period, facing bureaucratic hurdles or dealing with people acting purely out of self-interest, you have to trust God's sovereign purpose.
That's right. God uses these secular decisions, this opposition, even the hatred of enemies, to advance his kingdom and to perfectly position his people. So if you are experiencing injustice today, try to take comfort that God isn't absent. He is simply weaving the threads of your situation into his greater ultimate tapestry. He is preparing your next stage of witness, even if you can't see it yet.
That leads perfectly into our second insight, this necessary blend of boldness, wisdom, and rights. Paul didn't just sit passively in prison waiting for a miracle, did he?
Not at all. He combined spiritual boldness with very strategic practical wisdom.
How so?
Well, he refused to concede guilt and stood boldly on the truth of the resurrection. That's the spiritual boldness. But he also strategically used his legal rights as a Roman citizen. That appealed to Caesar. This is a critical lesson the teaching materials emphasize. Paul didn't rely only on the spiritual. He leveraged every legitimate means at his disposal.
It really reminds us of that call in Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, King James Version, to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We're not called to be naive or just victims of circumstance.
Exactly. Therefore, the practical application for us today is that modern believers should use every legitimate tool available to them. That might be your education, your professional skills, your legal rights, your intellectual property, maybe your political platforms, or even influence on social media. Use these things to defend the gospel and yourself when necessary. We're called to be strategic actors in the world, not just passive bystanders, ensuring our rights are used to advance the truth, just as Paul used his citizenship to secure passage to Rome.
And the third insight brings us back to that period of frustrating inaction, perseverance, and God's timing. It's easy for us to look back now and say those 2 years of imprisonment were necessary. But imagine being Paul, sitting in that cell day after day.
Oh, absolutely. Those 2 years were not wasted time from God's perspective. They were the duration necessary for the right political pieces to fall into place. They were waiting for Festus to arrive, establish himself, and then for King Agrippa to make that convenient visit to Caesarea. God was preparing the grandest, most effective audience possible for Paul's testimony.
So the application for you, the listener, is to try and remain faithful during your own seasons of waiting, those times of apparent inactivity. If you feel stuck, maybe unproductive, remember that God might be assembling the necessary people or resources or circumstances behind the scenes. He could be preparing your next great opportunity for witness.
The key takeaway, summarizing this entire chapter, as stressed by the You Need Faith in Jesus team, is really simple when you boil it down. The world's great pomp, all that glittering, ostentatious display of earthly authority, it's utterly fleeting. It passes away. But the simple, powerful, and unwavering truth of the risen Christ, shared by a spirit-filled believer like Paul, holds transformative power. And that's true regardless of whether the audience is the lowest prison guard or the highest king on a throne.
What an incredible example of God turning a legal and political, quagmire into a divine launchpad. Paul's experience in Acts chapter 25 really confirms that his ultimate mission in Rome was guaranteed, not just by sheer human effort or his legal genius, though he used those things, but fundamentally by a strategic, spirit-led step, that appeal that aligned precisely with God's prophetic promise.
He simply stepped onto the path God had already guaranteed for him. And we really hope this detailed teaching discussion of Acts chapter 25 has illuminated your understanding of God's perfect sovereignty over all the affairs of mankind. It's quite something to contemplate.
It truly is. Now, to solidify your understanding of this lesson, be sure to use the flashcards to review key terms and then take the quiz. Passing the quiz will mark this lesson as complete.